The rain fell in thin silver lines against the tall glass windows of the corporate tower as Emma Carter quietly placed her resignation letter on the desk. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were steady. In the distance, the city lights flickered like tiny stars. She took a deep breath, placed her company badge beside the envelope, and whispered to herself, "I'm sorry, Daniel." What she carried inside her was not just fear, it was a secret that could destroy everything. Emma was pregnant, and the father was the billionaire CEO she worked for. Just a year earlier, Emma had been an ambitious assistant at Harrison Global, working directly under its brilliant but emotionally distant CEO, Daniel Harrison. Daniel was known across the business world as a ruthless strategist who built his billion-dollar empire before turning 35. Employees admired him, investors trusted him, but no one truly knew him, except Emma. Over months of late-night meetings, business trips, and endless projects, she saw a different side of him, the tired man behind the powerful reputation. Their professional relationship slowly turned into something neither of them expected. It started with small conversations after long workdays. Daniel would ask Emma about her life, her childhood dreams, and the small-town bakery her mother once owned. Emma noticed how his serious expression softened whenever he listened. One winter evening, after closing a massive deal that changed the company's future, Daniel invited her for a quiet dinner to celebrate. That night, between laughter and honest confessions, the invisible wall between boss and assistant disappeared. For the first time in years, Daniel felt human again. But the world Daniel lived in was complicated. Powerful investors constantly watched him. The board of directors expected perfection. His name appeared in headlines every week. A relationship with an employee could destroy both his reputation and Emma's career. So when their one emotional night together happened, both of them silently agreed it could never happen again. They returned to work the next morning as if nothing had changed. Weeks later, Emma's life turned upside down. She stared at the small pregnancy test in her apartment bathroom, her heart pounding so loudly it echoed in the quiet room. Two clear lines. There was no doubt. She sat on the cold tile floor, covering her mouth to stop the tears. The father was Daniel Harrison, the most powerful man she knew. Emma's mind filled with questions. Would he believe her? Would he think she was trying to trap him? Would the media destroy them both? Emma made a painful decision. She would disappear. The next morning she resigned without explanation. Her coworkers were shocked, but Emma simply smiled and said she needed a new chapter. Within days, she packed her belongings and left the city behind. She traveled nearly 6 hours away to a quiet little town called Willow Creek, where life moved slowly and nobody cared about corporate empires. There, Emma rented a small apartment above an old bookstore. She found work at a local cafe owned by a kind, elderly woman named Margaret Lewis, who never asked too many questions. The pay was small, but the peace Emma felt in Willow Creek was something she hadn't experienced in years. As months passed, her pregnancy began to show. Emma spent quiet evenings walking through the town's tree-lined streets, gently holding her growing belly. Sometimes she wondered what Daniel would say if he knew the truth. Other times she convinced herself it was better this way. Her child would grow up far away from the cold world of billionaires and headlines. But in the towering offices of Harrison Global, something felt wrong. Daniel Harrison sat in his office late one night, staring at Emma's empty desk through the glass wall. She had left months ago, yet the silence she left behind still bothered him. Emma had always been reliable, thoughtful, and honest. Her sudden resignation made no sense. At first he tried to ignore it, but as weeks passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been left unsaid. Daniel finally ordered his private investigator to find her. It took weeks of searching, but eventually they discovered Emma living quietly in Willow Creek. When Daniel read the report, he was confused. Why would someone as ambitious as Emma abandon her career to work at a small cafe in the middle of nowhere? There was only one way to find out. 2 days later, A black luxury car slowly drove into the peaceful streets of Willow Creek. Emma was standing behind the cafe counter when the doorbell chimed softly. She looked up casually, but the coffee cup slipped from her hand when she saw who had walked in. Daniel Harrison. He stood there in a dark coat, rain on his shoulders, his sharp blue eyes locked on her face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The entire cafe seemed to fall silent. Then Daniel noticed something. Emma's rounded belly. His eyes widened with shock as the realization slowly spread across his face. "Emma," he said quietly, his voice unsteady, "are you pregnant?" Emma's heart raced. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was happening, she felt completely unprepared. "Yes," she whispered. Daniel took a slow step forward, his mind struggling to catch up with what he was seeing. A million questions flooded his thoughts, but only one mattered. "Is the baby mine?" Emma's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. The room felt like it stopped breathing. Daniel stood frozen. For the first time in years, the confident billionaire had no idea what to say. He ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed by the truth that had suddenly changed his entire world. "You left without telling me," he finally said. Emma wiped her tears. "I didn't want to ruin your life." Daniel stared at her stunned. "Ruin my life?" "Yes," Emma said softly. "You're Daniel Harrison, billionaire CEO. The media watches everything you do. If people found out you got your assistant pregnant, it would destroy your reputation." Daniel looked at her for a long moment before shaking his head slowly. "Emma, you don't understand something." He stepped closer, his voice calmer now. "The only thing that ruined my life was the day you disappeared." Emma's breath caught. Daniel looked at her belly again, his expression softening. The reality was finally settling into his heart. He was going to be a father. All the wealth, success, and power he had built suddenly felt meaningless compared to the tiny life growing inside Emma. "You should have told me," he said gently. "I was scared," Emma admitted. "I thought you'd think I was trapping you." Daniel shook his head firmly. "I've negotiated billion-dollar deals with the toughest investors in the world," he said quietly. "But none of that ever mattered as much as this moment." He paused before adding softly, "You and this baby are the most important things in my life now." Emma broke down crying. For months she had carried the weight of fear alone. Hearing Daniel's words felt like sunlight breaking through a long storm. But their journey was far from easy. Daniel faced enormous pressure when news eventually reached the corporate world. Investors questioned his judgment. The board worried about his image. Media outlets began speculating about the mysterious woman in Willow Creek. Yet for the first time in his life, Daniel didn't care about public opinion. He spent weeks in the small town, helping Emma prepare for the baby. The billionaire CEO who once commanded boardrooms now assembled baby furniture and painted nursery walls. Slowly, Willow Creek welcomed him as one of their own. And when the day finally came, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Daniel held his daughter in his arms, tears silently falling down his face. Her tiny fingers wrapped around his hand, as if she already trusted him completely. "What should we name her?" Emma asked gently. Daniel smiled through his tears. "Grace," he said. Because after everything, the fear, the mistakes, the distance, Grace was exactly what had brought them back together. In the end, Emma realized something important. Running away had protected her from fear, but facing the truth had given her something far more powerful: love, family, and a future she never imagined. And Daniel Harrison, the billionaire who once believed success meant power and control, finally understood that the greatest fortune in life was not measured in money, but in the people who choose to stay.